everyone. Glad you're here for some training in youth ministry. My name is Josh, and I'm one of the co-founders of Download Youth Ministry, and I'm honored for this privilege to be sharing with you. Now, if you're watching this with a team or maybe alone as part of an online course, thanks for taking the time out of your busy schedule for a little more education and hopefully to gain a little more insight and prompting on how to be a better youth worker. I can already tell that the students in your ministry are fortunate to have you as a leader because you're serving with that teachable spirit. Now, I don't know about you, but the people who have made the most influential impacts in my life, they did something very basic. They simply showed up. They were consistent voices and examples in my life that encouraged me, loved me, and they were present. They were just there for me. Time and time again, the people who are on my short list of key influencers during my teenagers' years, they just showed up consistently. Now, I took it for granted, but now as an adult, I realize just how amazing that is. So dream with me for a minute. What would it look like if in your youth ministry, it became known as the place where people showed up? I mean, it would be a big deal. It would be incredible youth ministry. Well, I think back to a volunteer youth worker in my life. His name was Jim. Jim was a firefighter in our community. He loved Jesus, and for a few hours a week, he showed up for the guys at my church. And I was one of those guys. Now, he didn't have a formal seminary education. He didn't even know the top 10 songs on iTunes or Spotify. In fact, neither of those had even been invented yet. But he consistently showed up every week for us knuckleheads. In fact, I don't remember a single lesson that he prepared for us. Now, I'm not saying that to discourage you, but I do remember one thing. He showed up. He showed up at youth group each week. He showed up at summer camp. He showed up at my sporting events and even showed up at my graduation. He was there. Even in some of the more difficult times, like when I lost one of my grandparents and was grappling with death for the very first time in my young life, with a broken heart, and I didn't want to bother my parents because they had just lost their parent. I didn't know what to do or think, and boom, there he was. It was like he knew the right thing to do was to be there. In fact, you may be able to think back to a time when somebody important in your life showed up for you. I'm sure it was a big deal at the time. Now, maybe you never really talked about it. Maybe you never even thanked that person, but in your reflection as an adult, you realize just how important him or her, how important showing up was for you. The consolation, the encouragement, the love. Just as a quick aside, right? It might be a really meaningful thing for you to reach out to that person who was there for you as a teenager and just give them a quick thank you. It might mean more to them than you would ever know. Here's what I know. When someone shows up, it means there was a sacrifice. And you recognizing that gift of sacrifice, well, it'd be huge. Of course, showing up isn't the only thing, right? Like just being on time, being present, it's so much more than that. Think of the best basketball player in the world. Now, I won't be specific with someone here because if I don't pick your favorite, you might not watch the rest of this training or do it out of some maniacal protest for your favorite team. Okay, great. Maybe you don't like basketball. That's okay. I think you'll still understand this. All right, so you've got the greatest basketball player in your mind, him or her. You've got her. Okay, good. Now, what would it look like if they just showed up at the arena? They didn't have their uniform on. They were wearing street shoes. They hadn't practiced. Their head wasn't in the game. Oh, they were there, but they weren't prepared. Well, I'll tell you what would happen. They may have showed up, but they would lose the game for sure. There's no way you're going to overcome the opposition if you're not ready when you show up. Now, the same thinking is also true in youth ministry. Yes, showing up is a big deal, but it's only half of it. If we just show up and we aren't prepared and ready to go, we're probably gonna lose. We're not gonna overcome the opposition if we're not ready. So when I think about Jim and the other youth workers who really influenced in my life, yes, they showed up, but they also showed up prepared. They were prepared in the following ways. One, they showed up with a positive and caring attitude. Two, they showed up with a tender heart. They were ready to serve and they were sensitive to my needs. They showed up reliant on God's power, that they knew that they were needed and a vital part of our youth ministry. So what about you? By the very fact that you're watching this, you're here in this training today, it says so much about your desire to learn, which I so appreciate. But I want you to be more effective as a youth worker. So you're probably thinking to yourself, okay, Josh, I want to be more effective too. How can I be more ready to show up? And that's a great question. I'm so glad you asked that, so I can answer it now. Here's the deal. If you remember these two actions, you'll always win. Be present and be prepared. It's that simple and it's that complex, right? Your presence is important. But if you throw in preparation with presence, now we're talking. That's far better. So you show up, but you're prepared with your lesson. You're prepared for discussion. You're prepared with good questions to stir on that discussion. You're prepared to follow up on the topic that you talked about last week, or a kid who was missing from your group and missed a week. You're prepared to smile. You're prepared to empathize with the pains in a student's life. You're prepared to pray for them. You're prepared to provide guidance and, when needed, discipline. So most importantly, when you show up prepared with your heart in communion with God's heart for teenagers, when you show up refreshed and filled up with the Holy Spirit, that's when His Spirit shows up through you. What happens when leaders are present and prepared? Well, in my experience, really good things happen. Actually, God-sized things happen that might not have happened if you just came unprepared. Great conversations happen. People open up. You instinctively respond being led by God's Spirit. And in the end, lives are changed. Now, that's a youth ministry I want to be a part of. A youth ministry where caring adults like you show up, but prepared and ready to be used by God to strengthen and advance His kingdom. So next time you show up at youth group, instead of saying, well, at least I'm here, right? Maybe in your heart you say, here I am, God, ready to be used by you. I know this attitude will make you a better youth worker. Imagine how much more care and love those students will have when you show up and you show up prepared to serve them. I pray for blessings on you. As you go, be like my friend Jim, who showed up in my life and made a world of difference. There's a teenager out there who is a lot like me, just waiting for you to show up. Thanks for doing that so faithfully.